Welcome, everybody, to our next round of session spotlights for Convergence 2026. This is an opportunity for you to get to know our upcoming leaders, their sessions, and to give you a better idea of what you would like to register for during Convergence 2026 in New Orleans. Today, we will be hearing from Emerson Croft, Sue Helmken, Angela Schneider, and Gretchen Fancher. Registration is open. We have one more week of advanced priority registration. Priority registration then opens on October 27th, and general registration begins on November 10th. So if you're interested in getting a head start and signing up for classes, please head online or give us a call and we would be happy to help. As a reminder, Convergence 2026 will be taking place in New Orleans, Louisiana from August 12th through the 16th. You can find a digital copy of the registration booklet online. There you'll see all kinds of information about the different sessions and events taking place, including the marketplace, exhibition, fashion show, keynote speaker, tours, and more. We will be hosting over 100 sessions, ranging from 90-minute seminars to 3-day workshops. As we learn more about these classes today, please put any questions you have in the Q&A section. This is your time to get answers directly from the instructors. First up, we welcome Emerson Croft, who is going to be talking about their digital warping on a sectional beam class.
Hello, let me get my PowerPoint pulled up. All right. Y'all can see it?
Yep, looks great.
Perfect. I just have a few photos pulled up. Nothing incredibly detailed as to what we'll be getting into in the workshop, but just some examples of what our sectional warps look like and how we have it set up to do it in my studio. So my name is Emerson Croft. I am the weaving manager for Berea College Student Craft. I have been a production weaver for about 8.5 years now. And in our studio at Berea College, we make approximately 1,000 woven items for sale every year, with a team of about 19 students working 10 hours a week. So it's a pretty big endeavor. And because of that, working in production studios, we put on long warps. It's actually how I learned to warp. I thought that 40 yards was a short warp until maybe about 3 years ago, when I finally got my own loom. So I have a lot of experience in this. We have a lot of different systems in place to do this kind of warping. And so I will be sharing how we do it in our studio. So let me see if it'll go to the next slide. It was being a little bit slow earlier. There we go. So that's a picture of me from several years ago in the process of warping. So you can see it's a little bit, we have some pretty crazy systems that we use, but we have to use it in order to use the mill cones that we get, which are about 3-pound cones. So this is definitely going to be a process. If you're interested in doing more production style weaving, this is going to be something that's going to be more interesting to you. We'll be going over different tools and equipment that we use, best practices, tips and tricks to go from, I think a lot of people when they're getting started sectional warping can end up with sort of slanted warps like you see on the left here. We want to go from that to a more nice, flat, even, consistent warp like we see on the right. Here's a picture of our setup in the studio for our big mill cones. You can see it's pretty complex, but I'll be talking about it step by step. I will have pictures and videos in a slideshow format. I will be making those pictures and videos and that entire slideshow accessible, available to participants so that they can continue to review that information after it goes home. I'll also be offering an optional booklet with more written, detailed instructions that'll be available after the class. And this is just another picture of our warping setup. It's one of our old students working and getting those looms warped. This method will be good for warping up to about 200 yards at a time, which is a lot. But it can also be good for warping as little as like 10 to 20 yards, depending on the circumference of your warp beam. And that's the basic overview. If there are any questions, I would love to answer them.
Thank you so much for sharing about this. This is such a cool class. I also for a short period of time worked at like a narrow fabric manufacturer, so I have a little bit of experience with some of these larger industrial type looms where, we even just went off of a creel. So it's really cool to see how you're kind of adapting that to maybe a smaller scale. And we do have a couple questions here. This is a 3-hour seminar. What would you like folks to bring with them to the class?
Just something to take notes with. This is going to be more of a presentation format. There's not going to be any demonstrations or hands-on practice. So just something to be able to remember the things that I mentioned and write down answers to my questions.
Great. And I just want to highlight again that you mentioned that students will be able to take some of the handouts and have access to the presentations afterwards. So that's something that they'll be able to take with them. You mentioned that when you transitioned to having your own home studio or your own loom that, you realized that the yardage amounts were vastly different for what equated to a lot. So you're saying this technique can warp up to 200 yards. Have you kind of figured out how many yards like a standard home loom can warp, or do you have like a way for somebody to figure out like a mathematical equation to figure out maybe how much their loom can actually handle, or is that some trial and error?
That's going to be some trial and error from my experience. It's going to largely, a lot of it's going to depend on the circumference of your warp beam. I know a lot of like smaller home looms, like I have an 8 shaft Harrisville, and that warp beam is very narrow around. And so that, depending on how much room you have on your warp, I find that when you're warping more traditionally, where you wind your warp bundles and then beam them on after the fact, rather than going directly from the cone or the spool to the loom, um, I struggle to maintain good tension when I get into longer warps. And so I find that doing this style of warping helps maintain better tension over those longer warps so that you can go longer without having to cut off and retension your project.
Mm, yeah, yeah. I have a question here from Christine Williamson, who is asking, for those who don't have a sectional beam, would this have helpful tips that could apply anyway? Or is it very specific to?
It's going to be very specific to sectional beams. I have no experience with direct warping without sections. I have seen it, like pictures and videos of it being done before, but that's not something that I personally can speak to. And so I wouldn't feel comfortable giving any sort of advice or feedback on that situation.
If somebody's interested in this, maybe they don't have one yet, but they're interested in the possibility of transitioning to this, would this still be a helpful seminar for them to learn about the process and how it could maybe impact their practice?
I would think so, yes. If someone is interested in getting a loom with a sectional beam at some point, this would definitely be helpful.
I remember I got a loom at one point in time that was handmade and they had made their own sectional beam, but I didn't know how to use it, so I actually took it off. But I think I still have the parts, so this might be exciting to see if there's a way to use that. So thank you so much. This sounds like such a fun seminar, and I'm excited to see what tips and tricks people learn about warping
Of
with a
course, thank
sectional
you.
beam. Again, that was Emerson Croft talking about the direct warping on a sectional beam class, which is a 3-hour seminar taking place on Thursday, August 13th. Up next, we have Sue Helmken, who's going to be talking about her Whistle While You Warp class.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to be gearing this class for the people that feel like warping the loom is absolute drudgery, and do I really want to weave bad enough to warp? It doesn't have to be such a chore. I've been weaving for over 40 years, and I've been teaching for 30 of those 40 years. And I have a lot of experience I do both back to front, front to back, and sectional warping. I will not be covering the sectional. I can answer questions on it. We can discuss it. What I will do is demonstrate both back to front warping and front to back warping. talk about how you cut the warps, um, do a lot of information on how to look for mistakes and to avoid them, little tips and tricks that can help you keep things in line so you don't get partway through and find some mistake in the background. So much of that are little things to look for that you don't consider until somebody points it out to you. There are different times when these techniques one might be more appropriate than the other. There are times when, while I prefer direct beaming or back to front, sometimes I have to do front to back depending on a weave structure might affect this. Sometimes I find different types of looms. My largest loom is just the devil's own to try and do from back to front. So I always warp that one front to back. And some people may have I have some students who might have back issues or vision issues, and there are ways to help get around some of that to help you find the task a little less tedious. Excuse me, I'm getting off the end of a cold here. There are certain yarns also that might be better. Some heavier yarns might do well with one technique. If you have yarns that might have more of a fuzz or lint to them or a lot of texture, we'll discuss which techniques might work best for that. We will also cover some sectional warping. Excuse me, not sectional, some warping with a warping paddle if you want to try and cut more than one thread at a time. That can be really fun. It makes the process go so much faster. But there are some things to do and avoid when you're things you should do, some things you should not try at once. Slow and steady is good, not trying to do too many at one time. So I want to cover all these and give you a chance to discuss any problems that you might have had and how we could work on that. We'll also be talking a good bit about equipment that you use. There are different sizes and types of warping boards. There are warping mills, and you might find one more convenient for you than the other. I feel that as a teacher, my job is not to say this is the way to do it, because there are so many different ways. I think everybody could come in with their own techniques. What my job is to do is to find you the way that works best for you and to show you how you can become more consistent with that so that you feel comfortable and are able to put on longer and longer warps so that you're not having to thread constantly, get down to the fun of weaving more. But I encourage anyone to bring if you have something you can take pictures of, or even bring samples of something that we can discuss and answer questions for you. My intent is for you to come away from this feeling much more confident in your warping abilities and to help you maybe stretch your boundaries a bit. We can discuss other things depending on what the time allows. But I think you will come to this and feel much better about what you'll be able to do and maybe get some ideas on trying new techniques. So I will have some slides and things for you. This will be some hands-on. Mostly I'll be demonstrating, but I will have some slides and things as well as very detailed notes for you. So you'll have the notebooks to be able to jot down things. And as a backup, I'll have the slides and presentations for you to be able to use in the future. So if you have any questions, I'd be delighted to talk to you about it.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. So I'd love to address kind of what you just brought up at the end there, that you will have kind of demonstrations and slides and such. Are the demonstrations going to be like you'll have a loom there that people can really see how these different methods are worked?
Absolutely. I'm actually going to I'll have one loom and I'll bring a couple of different warping boards to show what I do and don't like about different ones. Some equipment is made better than others. And also, if you're fortunate enough to have someone who can do woodworking for you, it's critical to have the warping board really sturdy and reinforced well. So I'll be pointing out things to look for in that. I will demonstrate cutting a warp, and I will have some warps pre-cut where I can quickly dress the loom first front to back, and then show you how you can take it off the loom and mark your cross and continue, and then use a warp to do back to front. And towards the end, I will give you hands-on on the using a warping paddle, because seeing it doesn't always make it crystal clear to you, because once you start actually winding back and forth with the warping paddle, if you turn your hands or twist it, then you're going to run into mistakes. So for that part, I will be doing some hands-on. The others I'll be demonstrating, and I will put in some deliberate mistakes so you can see how to pick them out and correct them, and then again cover how to avoid doing them in the first place.
Great, great. I love when there's the physical demo there. I think that can really help, and the hands-on sounds like it'll be wonderful. So, um, you talked about, kind of what you're going to have there. What should students expect to leave with? You mentioned kind of maybe having some handouts and things. That what'll they be walking away with?
Yes, they're going to walk away with a detailed notebook. I will be having everything in print that I demonstrate, and I do encourage bringing pencil if you want extra paper to jot down notes as I go so that you can really remember certain things. But then I do want to I'll have a link there that you can go to for the visual, to have some slides and pictures of the different steps that we're doing to make sure that you really retain all that information. There's a lot of information. I tell people constantly, it's not that weaving is so difficult, it's just that there are a lot of little things that you need to do. And sometimes you can be missing one of those steps and you can't figure out why it's not working for you. So I believe in having both a thorough written piece to review and the visual. I'm painfully visually oriented. We all have different ways of learning. So I like to give you both sides there, to have the written as well as the visual references.
Great. And I just want to highlight too, because yeah, the title is, Whistle While You Warp, but I want to highlight that you were also talking about dressing the loom and all of those other steps leading up to the weaving process. So this sounds like it's going to be a wonderfully like well-rounded class with tips and tricks to get you to that part.
Yeah.
Um,
We're
it
going to cover
sounds like
start to finish. I will discuss something about some yarns that you might want to avoid until you feel more comfortable with it. Um, I will be choosing the yarns, choosing the equipment, getting the warp cut properly, tips for that, dressing the loom, the whole thing from stem to stern.
And I feel like even though this is kind of, I mean, it's a beginner class, it's definitely something that if somebody's just starting out, that it would be really helpful, but it also sounds like it could maybe be helpful for anybody, even intermediate or beyond, who's maybe just interested in some of the different techniques or just isn't quite sure that they know all of the details about that. Is that true? Or what kind of
Oh,
experience levels do you think people need in order to really get the most out of this class?
I think both beginning and intermediate will benefit from this. Sometimes you may be doing things in the way that you're accustomed to, but if you want to expand what you're doing, say go for finer yarns or wider warps or longer warps, and not totally confident in that, I think that some of the tips that I'm giving will help you with that, to know what to look for as you grow as a weaver, and to make better decisions about what you're doing.
Thank you so much for answering all of these questions and sharing more about your class. Again, that was Sue Helmken and her Whistle While You Warp class, which is a 3-hour seminar taking place Sunday, August 16th. Next, we've got Angela Schneider, who's going to be talking about her beginning Inkle weaving class.
Thank you, Erica. So what we're going to be doing in this one-day workshop on Friday is making things like these ankle bands. These are just work-piece plain weave bands that have a lot of different uses, and it's really fun to weave on ankle looms, I think. Let's show you some pictures here. So again, this is Friday, August 14th. It's an all-day workshop, and it's for beginners. This workshop is no experience required. So if you have no band weaving experience, that's fine, either Inkle or tablet weaving or any other type. If you don't have weaving experience on a multi-shaft loom or a rigid Heddle, that's okay too. This is a totally different type of weaving, and so you can come in with just a loom and your yarns and your shuttle, and we'll get you started from the very beginning. What we're going to be doing in this class, I've got several Inkle looms shown here. I've got a little tiny one. I don't recommend that one for beginners, but if you happen to have a little 8-inch wide Inkle loom, that's all you've got, we'll make it work. I've got behind here is like the Ashford Inklet, or like the Louisiana or the Lochan looms that are small. Those work great, all the way up to the one in the back, which is the big shocked Inkle loom, or the Becca Inkle loom is that size. Those work great too. So any of those Inkle looms are going to be fine. So we're going to start out by reading a pattern. I'm asking you to bring some colored pencils so you can pick one of the patterns that's in the handout and copy it in your colors for your yarn. And then we will warp the Inkle loom, and it's an entirely different process than the other warping techniques that have been discussed for the other seminars that are being covered today. Warping an Inkle loom is very different than warping a multi-shaft loom. And then we will get on to the weaving. And what I find with Inkle weavers, the trick is getting the tension just right while you're weaving. And I'll show you my very first band. Actually, it's right here. And the pattern doesn't show up all that well. It's a little bit wobbly. It's because I just didn't know how to get the tension and the beat correct. And so there's going to be a lot of hands-on watching what you're doing and giving you those little micro adjustments that will help you get really clean edges and really crisp definition in your patterns. So it's going to be a lot of practice. And I'm also going to show you techniques like how to start your band so that it won't unravel, and how to tuck in the band at the tails at the end so it won't unravel. And if you want to do a series of bookmarks, there'll be a way to leave a bunch of little pieces and you never have to sew in the ends, because we have a trick to making that a little bit more efficient. And if you're not already a band weaver, I highly recommend giving it a try, because there's so many wonderful uses for Inkle bands. It's a great way to play with color, and you can make all kinds of useful things like guitar straps, or straps for your mandolin, or even your saxophone if you're so inclined. You can make lanyards for your name tag, so you can walk around Convergence with a custom lanyard that you've woven for your tag, instead of having something pinned to your shirt. Your straps for your yoga mat or a belt. And of course, if you're a hand weaver or a knitter and you need straps for your various tote bags, Inkle bands are a perfect way to get coordinating straps for your other hand woven goods. And of course, you can't leave your furry little friends out, so you can make collars and leashes. And you can even, adorn your shoes with custom shoelaces, or your jacket with fancy trim or closures that are made with these custom Inkle bands that match. So what you need to have in order to take this class is an Inkle loom, a belt shuttle, which is kind of like a stick shuttle, except it's got a beveled edge. That becomes your beater. So you see there's no beater on this loom. That shuttle is it. That's what you use to pack your weft. You're going to need some string heddles, and you can get fancy textile heddles for your Inkle loom, or you can just use string heddles, which is what I use. They're just loops of string. Your instructions that come with your Inkle loom will tell you what size to make, or I can send you instructions to how to figure out how to make the proper size. You need yarns. I recommend a smooth, non-elastic yarn. Size 3/2 is good, 5/2 is good, 8/4. Like cotton carpet warp is good. The crochet cotton of that similar size is really good. You can weave with yarns that are larger or smaller than that, but I don't recommend getting down into 10/2 or even 20/2 for your first Inkle band, because it's so tiny. It's going to be a little easier for you to work with a 3/2 or a 5/2. You'll need 2 to 5 colors. I recommend more than 2. You get more interesting patterns that way. But you want all of your colors to be the same yarn, just different colors. And use solids, not variegated, so that your patterns will show up clearly. You'll need a sewing gauge or a small ruler. This is the kind of sewing gauge that I like, with a little slidey thing. If you don't have one, a ruler will be fine. Plus, I'll have a handful of these to borrow for the day. Your colored pencils for coloring your pattern. Scissors. And again, if you're flying and you don't want to bring scissors, I'll have some spares. And a tapestry needle. And I will be providing a handout that's got the detailed instructions for how to warp, how to weave, how to wind your shuttle, how to do that trick with ending the band, and a couple of other useful items for finishing your bands and seeing into things. That handout goes home with you, and it's got photographs of all the processes too. And so please come experience the wonderful world of band weaving with this beginner workshop on Friday, and I would love to have you there.
This
If
sounds
there's any
like
questions?
a wonderful introduction to band weaving. So I think I just want to maybe highlight even a few things that you said and make sure I even heard you correctly. When you were talking about materials to bring and the different colors, when you say, everything should be the same material, just different colors, do you mean it should be like the same weight, the same actual fiber content, or as long as it's the same thickness, is that sufficient?
To start off with, let's bring all the same um, thickness and fiber. That way you don't have to worry about if there are any differences. Like I do some patterned bands where I would use cotton or linen with wool, but it takes up differently. And so let's just not involve those issues while you're learning a basic process. So all the same yarn, all the same fiber and size would be good.
Right. And since this is a beginner class, I know there's a lot of classes where you have to bring it, you have to have a pre-warped loom. You're going to be warping in class?
Exactly. Bring an empty loom and your cones of yarn or balls of yarn, and we will warp the loom in the morning, and probably by lunchtime we'll be reading.
Great. For beginners, how you were talking about kind of some of the projects that they'll be able to get out of this. Um, how much length maybe do you expect folks to be able to weave during this one day class? Are they going to be able to cut any projects off, or what will they kind of be leaving with at the end of the day?
Well, you will, one of the things that we'll be covering is how you get the different warp paths on your loom. Inkle weaving, this type of loom is a circular warp. So you kind of advance the whole warp around the loom as you go. So you can put on a very short warp or you can put on the maximum length of your loom. And it's going to be up to the student if they want to try like 1 yard and get it woven off in the day, or they want to max out what they can put on their loom and have lots of things to play with. And I'll recommend we do a couple of short pieces first so we can practice starting and stopping, and you can have a little practice to get your band really even. And then if you want to do a great big long piece at the end, you can have that to take home. So if you do the maximum warp on your loom, I expect you're going to take it home with the warp on it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for talking more about this class and giving us a deeper dive into what folks can expect if they sign up. And again, that was Angela Schneider talking about the Beginning Inkle Weaving class, which is a one-day workshop taking place on Friday, August 14th. And last for today, we've got Gretchen Fancher, who's going to be talking about double weave with 2 Heddles for rigid Heddle looms.
Hello. Let me so my name is Gretchen. I've been teaching rigid Heddle weaving for about 10 years. And this class is fairly new. Mostly what we're going to be doing, since we've been talking about warping, is warping the loom. The warp for threading both heddles is kind of complicated. So we're going to really focus on what the path through the heddles is for the different ends and how it creates 2 layers. Rigid heddle looms tend to be pretty narrow, so this is a way to weave a wider piece on your rigid heddle loom, like a baby blanket or something like that. I designed the class project to in stripes. And you end up with a buffalo plaid, which you could see in that original picture, so that you can tell that one warp will be in the top layer, one color, excuse me, will be in the top layer, and the other color will be in the bottom layer. But because they're alternating, you kind of end up with a unified piece of cloth rather than a cloth that's one color at the top and one color at the bottom. But the two colors definitely help you keep track of what is happening and what is supposed to be happening. So you want to make sure that you have a good contrast between your two colors. So this is the first step. Well, this is not the first step. The first step is warping, getting it wound on and threaded through the first heddle, and then the warps are tied in bunches according to the stripes, and that's kind of how we work. This is then working through threading the second heddle, which is the front heddle. So you can see in the back, there's one end going through the eye, and that's a brown end, and up here it's a pink one. And there's a whole, I provide a handout with written instructions and diagrams because people do need different process information in different ways. So I try to make sure that there's information for however people need to understand it. This is between the two heddles. There's a lot of troubleshooting because with all these extra ends, there's all these different ways that things can go not the way they're supposed to. So you will work through troubleshooting issues that come up when you're setting it up. You can see a crossed end there in between. So how to fix that when it happens. Here you can see the one pickup stick at the top up here that's already been inserted. And then this is the space for the second. There's two pickup sticks that you need to weave two layers. This is checking them. You can see right here, there's some ends missing. So that one has to be re-threaded through the shed to make sure that it's creating the proper shed. So this is the buffalo plaid cloth. This one, you can see some issues. They disappear when you're, excuse me, when you finish it. For this kind of double width cloth, this is the top layer you can see here, I will weave a header at the bottom because there's no way to do like a hem stitch or something on the bottom layer. So I will secure the last warps with a footer before taking it off the loom, and then hem stitch or, whatever, later. You could also weave a finer thread in there and create a hem to fold under. And so that way, I'm going to stop sharing. So in class, we will do the direct warping onto the rigid Heddle loom and threading through and getting everything set up for weaving and the steps of weaving. I'm working on having instructions for people who, I'm a righty, so I tend to go from right to left, but lefties tend to want to thread their heddles the other way. So I'm gonna, which normally wouldn't matter with a rigid Heddle loom, but with this, it kind of does. So I'll have instructions for both, and then also for some different types of rigid Heddle looms. I did not put a list of supplies. You need a rigid Heddle loom with ideally 2 separate Heddle blocks. Flip looms are very popular and they don't have separate Heddle blocks, so those do work as well. And 2 Heddles and the usual sort of rigid Heddle hook. You need 2 pickup sticks and 2 shuttles for the 2 different colors. It's good to have some extra ones just for kind of, sometimes you want to clear a shed, and it's good to have an extra pickup stick or shuttle for doing that. Questions?
Great. I do have a question. So it sounds like you're going to be warping in class. Do folks need to make their warp ahead of time,
No.
though? I'm sorry, I said warping in class. I meant dressing the loom winding on. Um, but you said no. So the warp will get made in class as well?
Well, with a rigid heddle loom, you kind of it's direct warping, so you measure it and dress the loom at the same time.
Gotcha. That shows you that I am not a rigid heddle weaver. Thank you for clarifying. All right. And then what kind of experience do you want students to already have before they come and take this double weave class?
People need to be pretty comfortable with weaving on a rigid heddle loom. It is a complicated technique. If you want to just have easy, relaxing weaving, this is maybe not the class for you, because the threading path and sorting out sort of what is all happening to get the double cloth can involve, it's like doing puzzles, which I personally love. So I kind of like things that challenge me a little bit. So yeah, you should be comfortable with pickup sticks and kind of understand what they do, even though we're using them to create a shed here, which I guess is what you do with them anyway. But so yeah, comfortable with direct warping independently, even though we're going to do it together. I don't expect anybody to come with the loom warped. But just kind of understand really what you're doing and how the loom works and pick up sticks.
Fantastic. This sounds like, yeah, like you're saying, maybe a little like mentally intensive. You're gonna have to be on. So since this is a 1 day workshop and you're going from start to finish, what can folks expect to walk away with at the end? Do you think they'll be able to finish weaving a certain length, or what's the goal?
Well, the goal is to have people weaving their two layers and understanding how that all works. Uh, Depending on how long of a warp, I mean, I don't know that people are going to have time to weave off what they warp. But the weaving itself is pretty straightforward. So it's really, focusing on the warping. And as a teacher, I tend to want to, I welcome the mistakes because that's really where you figure things out. So I'm hoping that we work through the issues that people encounter, and then they can go home and have they'll probably still have the warp on the loom and be able to continue weaving unless they make a really short warp, which is also an option.
But they'll be set up to go home and finish the project with confidence.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing more about that class with us. Again, that was Gretchen Fancher talking about double weave with 2 heddles for rigid heddle looms. Thank you all so much for joining us today and telling us about your classes, and thank you to everybody for listening in. You can find more information on our website, weavespindye.org. Look under that Convergence tab and head to Sessions and Leaders to find out more and register. We are going to be offering these session spotlights every weekday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time until mid-November, and the recordings will be available on HGA's YouTube channel. So if there are any other classes you're interested in, please join us, and I look forward to seeing you there.
Also, I want to mention that if you are having a difficult time trying to figure out how to plan your schedule, we do have a worksheet that's downloadable off of our website. If you go to that website page, Sessions, and you will find our worksheet, and you just download it, and it is broken out by day. It has everything that is happening. So here we have the day before the conference. So if you are going to the tour, then you can register and check in afterwards and so forth. But as you get to the days of the conference, it has every session listed. So if you are trying to figure out what does that look like, I know we're all visual people. You can make notes, mark which sessions are interest you. And so, for example, maybe you're taking a half-day session here on Wednesday and you want to see what your options are for later in the afternoon, everything is listed there. And like I said, it's by day. If you're doing a multi-day class, they're in gray to remind you that you've got those classes on those days. We've even added reminders to eat. Eating is so important. Visit the marketplace, visit the exhibits, and of course, volunteer. Make time to volunteer because this conference relies on our volunteers. So this spreadsheet is downloadable and available on our website, and you can print it out, and hopefully it'll help you plan your conference. And we hope you will join us. Have a wonderful day.